Well, the Arab League mission to Syria was meant to stop nearly a year of violence, but fighting between government forces and protesters has continued. Syria's opposition says the mission was destined to fail from the start. 2 car bombs in Damascus killed 44 people on the same day that the first Arab League officials arrived. The government blamed Al-Qaeda, but opponents say the attack was staged to justify the government crackdown. Days later, observers went to the flashpoint city of Homs. Residents there put the body of a 5-year-old boy on the hood of a car, and Arab League observers were caught in crossfire. Despite all of that, the head of the mission said that he hadn't seen anything frightening. The observers visited several other cities. Their presence encouraged protesters to hold some of their biggest demonstrations in months. Let's get a view now from Richard Weitz, who's the director of the Center for Political Military Analysis at the Hudson Institute. He joins us now live from Washington. Richard, the general in charge of the observer mission in Syria says they're in it for the long haul. Qatar's Prime Minister says that the mission has made some mistakes and that if the killing doesn't stop immediately, having observers there or not would be the same, and, quote, even makes us part of what's taking place in Syria. What do you think is likely to happen at this Arab League meeting in Cairo on Sunday?
Well, I think the Qatar minister is correct that what you're seeing now is that the presence of the observers is causing the protesters to come out in force and making them more vulnerable to being shot. The foreign ministers can, there are several options, but I don't, one, they could try and refer the situation to the United Nations Security Council as a threat to international peace and security, which alone has the option of authorizing the use of force to end the situation. I don't think that will happen. I think that there are several countries that are still very close to the Syrian government. Others are worried that, well, if the West intervenes in Libya and now Syria, maybe they'll be next. They could just say, well, we're going to continue the monitoring, we'll just put in some more monitors and not change much. I think that would be unlikely because I think people recognize it's an error. So I think they'll be somewhere in between. So I suspect what they'll try and do is they'll say, well, we're going to demand more responsiveness to the Syrian government. We want our own drivers, fewer escorts. We're going to work with the United Nations and get additional training about how to do the monitoring properly and so on. I think basically there's still a desire to keep the monitoring mission continuing so that the Arab League is still in charge of this effort.
The opposition Syrian National Council says that it wants any future additional monitors to be specialists and to be neutral, not to be subjected to policies of regimes that help the Syrian one. Is a weak monitoring mission better than none at all? Well,
that's a tough call. I think at this point it's been so far it's been counterproductive. Now, we didn't know that at the start, so I could see why they would want to try it. So at this point, they really have to think what they wanted to obtain. And unfortunately, the Arab League is divided, as usual. Some of them are not willing to make a major sacrifice to overthrow the Syrian government, whereas there are others which are eager to get rid of it, although not necessarily because they want to promote democracy in Syria. So given those divisions, I think there's a limit to what the Arab League can do. Though to be fair, I think the whole international community is struggling against this. NATO itself, it says it has no desire to use force in Syria. There's no prospect of any Western military intervention I see. I think the most likely case of any intervention would be in the case of Turkey. And that might be more acceptable to the Arab League, although of course we know there's still some lingering concern about neo-Ottoman ambitions and the fact that the Ottoman Empire ruled over those countries in the past.
If it gets as far as international intervention, you say that it's possible for the Arab League to continue the observer mission and perhaps to go to the UN. But what might happen at the Security Council given Chinese and Russian opposition to intervention?
Right. I think I think it's more likely that they'll just say they're going to work with the UN specialists. So the UN has a lot more experience at doing these kind of monitoring missions. So they could say, well, we'll work with some of the UN bodies in order to train our trainers better. They could go to the Security Council. It would be a bit risky, but I think it would still not result in any action because of the Chinese and Russian veto. So they might just be willing to do that at some point. I don't think at this meeting, but I think if we wait a bit longer, they might do that, basically pushing the issue onto the hands of the Security Council, and then the Security Council itself would continue the deadlock as we've seen. I think just the problem is there's just not a strong force or a strong motivation in the international community to get rid of the Syrian government. I'm sure a lot of people would like to see a change in regime, but there's not really any actor you can point to who's willing to do that at the moment. And so we're all trying for solutions which, per force, are not going to work.
Richard, good to talk to you. Many thanks indeed for being with us at Al Jazeera. Richard Weitz there in Washington.
Always my pleasure.